You are on Crocodile's True Stories channel. Enjoy listening.
It happened on one of those golden summer evenings that trick you into thinking everything is exactly how it's supposed to be. We were out at Amber's parents' country house, 2 hours outside the city. The kind of property where you can hear gravel crunch beneath your tires and smell cedar and barbecue smoke before you even park the car. They held these family dinners a few times a year, and despite my usual reluctance, I'd always show up, smile, carry chairs, pour wine, play the part. The long wooden table sat under strings of warm white lights that hung like soft halos between trees. Glasses clinked, conversation flowed. Someone's kid chased fireflies. It should have felt perfect. It did, for a moment. I stood behind Amber, gently topping off her glass with Pinot. Just a normal gesture between a husband and wife. We'd been together for 8 years, married for 6. I knew the curve of her spine by heart. I knew how she used to lean into my touch without thinking. But this time, when my hand brushed her waist, she flinched. It was so subtle I don't think anyone else noticed. But I did. Her shoulders tensed for the briefest second. She didn't look at me. She reached for the breadbasket, laughing a little too brightly at something her cousin had said. Then, like it was timed, her phone lit up in her purse beside her chair. The name that appeared on the screen was Tyler, work, innocuous on paper, but not on instinct. At the same moment, a man I didn't recognize, dark blazer, collared shirt unbuttoned at the top, expensive watch glinting under the lantern light, looked up from his plate across the table. He smiled, not broadly, not warmly, just slightly, a private smile, the kind meant for only one other person. And though Amber didn't return it, I watched her eyes flick in his direction and then quickly away, like she was trying not to look, like she had already looked too much. That's when the silence started in my head. Not externally. Everyone else kept talking, passing dishes, telling stories. But for me, everything narrowed, focused. I don't know if you've ever experienced that exact kind of stillness, where the room is loud but you feel like you're underwater. I didn't even realize I had stopped eating. I sat there, eyes on my plate, hands in my lap, brain spinning in slow motion. Every little detail around me sharpened unnaturally. The way Amber tucked her hair behind her ear twice in 30 seconds. The way her phone was now flipped face down. The fact that she was suddenly talking more to her uncle than to me. I knew that name, Tyler. She'd mentioned him once, maybe twice. In that way people mention coworkers they don't expect you to care about. Some vague story about coordinating a deliverable or sharing a client account. It hadn't registered at the time. I'm not even sure I'd made the mental note until that moment at the table brought it all roaring back. We drove home later that night with the windows down. Amber hummed along to some Fleetwood Mac playing low through the speakers. She looked serene, like the perfect picture of someone who had nothing to hide. But I'd started looking. Not accusing, just noticing. Carefully. Quietly. As she brushed her teeth in the bathroom, I stood in the doorway and asked, "That text from Tyler? Work stuff?" Casual tone. No bite. She spit, rinsed, then met my eyes in the mirror. "Oh yeah," she said, drying her face. "We've been finalizing the data handoff for that logistics audit I mentioned. He's just making sure things stay on track. Nothing dramatic." She smiled like it was funny. The idea of it being dramatic. Her tone was calm, maybe too calm, like someone who had rehearsed this conversation in her head, just in case. She walked past me, climbed into bed, and picked up a novel like nothing had happened. I didn't press. I didn't accuse. But I didn't sleep either. The thing is, I don't believe in gut feelings as a rule. I'm logical, analytical. I solve problems for a living. I rely on facts. But that night, my gut wasn't whispering. It was screaming. Amber had flinched at my touch. She had avoided Tyler's gaze. She had turned her phone face down. And her answer about the text, it was too clean. No umps. No pauses. No searching for the right words. Just neat like a script. It wasn't enough to start a fight over. Not yet. But it was enough to draw a line. An invisible one. And without even knowing exactly why, I stepped over it. In the following days, I paid attention in ways I hadn't before. And maybe that's my fault. Maybe I should have been paying closer attention months ago. But something about that dinner had snapped me out of autopilot. It was in the way she kissed me goodbye in the mornings. Light, distracted, already halfway out the door. The way her phone buzzed more often, and she barely glanced at it before sliding it into her bag. I started noticing that her gym trips were longer, that she wore lipstick even on casual workdays, that her laughter on Zoom calls came quicker when she thought I wasn't listening. And I realized something I didn't want to admit. Amber wasn't distracted. She was distant, methodically, deliberately distant. But this wasn't a confrontation. Not yet. This was the quiet before a decision. This was the gathering of puzzle pieces. And that night at her parents' place, that was the first piece. There's a line people talk about in relationships. The moment where something shifts, where you don't necessarily fight, but you feel yourself cross into unfamiliar territory. A place where the air is thicker and the trust a little thinner. That moment is rarely loud. It's usually quiet, subtle, barely visible. But once you cross it, everything changes. You start remembering things you once dismissed. You start questioning things you once accepted. You start seeing a version of your partner that feels slightly off. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. That's what that night did. It rewired my instincts. And from that point on, I wasn't just Mark, the husband. I became Mark, the observer. I didn't say anything. I didn't accuse her. I didn't start going through her phone or asking invasive questions. But I started watching. Because sometimes betrayal doesn't come crashing through the front door. Sometimes it seeps in through the cracks. Quiet. Intentional. Hidden behind a perfectly normal smile. That's what I saw that night across the dinner table, the crack. The man who smiled. The phone that lit up. The flinch. The first tremor before the break. And though no one else at that dinner noticed a thing, I knew. I knew everything had just started to change. In the days that followed, something inside me rewired. It's hard to explain unless you've been there, that shift from suspicion to slow-burning clarity. The moment you stop wondering if something's wrong and start recognizing that it already is. That dinner, that moment with Amber and her reaction to Tyler's name, didn't break anything. It exposed what had already been breaking. Started small like it always does. Her showers got longer. And not just long, immediate. She used to come home from work and head straight for the kitchen, still in heels, grabbing a handful of pretzels while asking about my day. Now, she walked through the door and beelined for the master bathroom. Every time. No kiss, no conversation, just water running and the lock clicking behind her. It didn't take long before I noticed the scent of her soap had changed. And every now and then, faintly, too faint for it to be hers, I caught the trace of cologne. Something clean, sharp, and distinctly not mine. Her phone, too, had its own rhythm. A while back, it used to live on the nightstand or the kitchen counter, often forgotten, buzzing with harmless notifications from group chats or discount apps. Now it was always on her, in her hand, tucked into her pocket, screen face down. Silent. Not on vibrate. Silent. I'd walk into the room and find her with the screen mid-lit, locking it quickly, then asking how my day was, as if I'd interrupted something. Then there was her wardrobe. I remember joking once that Amber could make a hoodie look elegant. That's who she was. Practical, soft-spoken, unbothered by trends. But lately, she'd been slipping into shorter coats, tailored blouses, boots with sharp heels, Berg *NDY lipstick, a smoky eye. That was new. She claimed it was confidence-building. Said she'd been reading a book about rebranding personal image, whatever that meant, and I tried to believe it. God help me, I tried. But it wasn't just the clothes. It was the timing. The days she wore the deepest lipstick always seemed to match the ones she left for strategy meetings or late reviews. Meetings that always started after 6 p.m. Always off-site. Always without details. Then one night I came home from work early, earlier than usual anyway, and she was on her laptop at the kitchen table. Not unusual, except when she noticed me, she snapped it shut. Literally snapped it. No transition. No hey babe. Just the jolt of her arms folding over the screen like she'd been caught mid-confession. She smiled too wide. Told me she was just checking our budget. She hasn't looked at our finances in years. It was in moments like that where I started reviewing everything I'd missed. Like the work trip 2 months ago. She'd gone to Portland for a 3-day conference. But the flight confirmation never showed up in our shared inbox. When I asked, she said she'd booked it through her work email. Said the hotel had been just okay. But when I looked it up later, the hotel was 4 stars and romantic as hell. Rose-lined balconies, spa packages, couples dinners. I didn't say anything. I told myself she deserved nice things. I just didn't realize she might have been sharing them. Memory became a minefield. I'd look back and realize how much had changed without me noticing. Her playlists shifted, songs that didn't sound like her. Her laugh changed. Her sleep schedule changed. She started going to bed later than me, scrolling her phone under the covers, texting with the screen turned just out of view. And through all of it, she remained perfectly kind. That was the most disorienting part. Amber didn't get cold or rude. She wasn't starting fights or ignoring me. She was polite, considerate even. She'd still ask if I needed anything from the store. Still text me, "Made it to work safe. You?" She still said, "I love you," when we hung up the phone. But those words had taken on the shape of routine, like reciting a password she no longer needed. And me? I told myself stories to fill the cracks. She's just tired. She's stressed from work. She's redefining herself. She's allowed to change. I convinced myself that I was overreacting, that the flicker of doubt in my gut was just anxiety, or worse, insecurity. But deep down, I knew. I knew because I'd lived with this woman for almost a decade. I'd loved her through every version of herself. And this wasn't growth. It was distance. It was calculated drift. And I was the anchor she'd quietly stopped tying herself to. There was one night that sealed it. She came home late, almost midnight, after one of those last-minute team dinners. She claimed they were onboarding a new department head. I was half asleep when she walked into the bedroom, heels in hand, perfume trailing behind her like she'd swum in it. She looked radiant. I wanted to say something, to compliment her, but I didn't, because when she caught me watching her, she paused, like she hadn't expected me to be awake. And then, she gave me a kiss on the forehead, not the lips, and whispered, "You didn't wait up, did you?" Not, "Sorry I'm late." Not, "Missed you." Just that. And it landed differently. Felt like a line in a play. I wanted to ask her straight out that night. Ask her who Tyler really was. If there was someone else. If I was slowly being phased out of my own life like a character who'd run out of script pages. But I didn't ask. Because part of me wasn't ready for the answer. So instead, I lay there beside her as she fell asleep, or pretended to. I stared at the ceiling and let the silence eat away at me. I watched the shadow of her breathing, the slight shift of her back as she turned away from me, and I realized, maybe for the first time, that I was alone in that bed. Not physically, but emotionally, spiritually. I was holding space for a connection that she had already started pulling away from. The next morning, I went through her drawer looking for something small. Nail clippers or a charger, I don't even remember. And that's when I saw the small black box tucked beneath her scarves. Inside was a bracelet. Not expensive, but delicate, silver with a thin charm etched with the letter T. She'd never worn it around me, and she hadn't mentioned receiving it. I closed the box, closed the drawer, said nothing. But inside, something finally clicked into place. I wasn't looking at isolated incidents. I wasn't overthinking. There was a pattern, and it had always been there. The invitation came through a mutual friend, one of those overly enthusiastic types who believed in bonding retreats and curated playlists. She called it a reset weekend. Good food, long hikes, lake views, and no cell service. In any other context, it would have sounded like a bad reality show. But Amber loved that sort of thing, and I was still doing the thing where I said yes before I thought too much. We arrived at the lake house just before sunset Friday. Big place, all glass and timber, perched on a quiet slope above the water. There were 12 of us in total, friends, co-workers, plus a few strangers roped in through shared connections. I recognized maybe half the faces. Among them, Tyler, He greeted us with a casual nod, the kind that carried no history on the surface. He wasn't dressed flashy, but everything he wore was deliberate. Boots with no scuffs, shirt pressed crisp, beard trimmed within millimeters. Amber hugged him. Not too long, not too close, just long enough for me to notice that she held her breath when she let go. Friday passed without incident. There were grilled burgers and acoustic guitars and too many jokes about forgotten sunscreen. I watched Amber the whole time, quietly. She didn't avoid me. In fact, she was warmer than usual, laughing, handing me a drink, even sitting on the arm of my chair at one point. It was all careful, like she was performing closeness instead of living it. Saturday morning, most of the group went kayaking. I stayed behind, claiming a headache. Amber said she wanted to stay with me. But 20 minutes later, she was out by the dock, towel draped low on her hips, sitting beside Tyler with coffee mugs between them. They didn't touch, but they didn't need to. You can tell when someone's trying not to touch. That energy has its own gravity. That evening, dinner turned into drinks, drinks turned into music, and the group scattered in all directions. Some played cards on the deck. Others drifted into the woods with lanterns and bottles of wine. Amber stuck close to Tyler. Every time she laughed, I flinched. Every time he whispered something in her ear, I watched her body tilt toward him like it couldn't help it. No one else seemed to notice. Or maybe they did and chose not to. I don't know which would have hurt more. Sometime after midnight, I walked away from the fire pit. My head was pounding, but not from the beer. I just needed air. Real air. Not the kind that's been cycled through too many lies and second glances. I followed the gravel path behind the house, past the guest cabins that lined the edge of the woods. It wasn't some grand investigation. I didn't expect to find anything. I just needed distance. But then I heard it. A laugh. Muffled. Close. One of the cabin doors, the second on the right, was slightly ajar. My hand moved before I could think. I nudged it open. Just an inch. Inside, the bedside lamp cast a low, amber glow over white sheets and a tangled silhouette. Amber. Sheets up to her chest. Hair down, wild. Shoulders bare. Tyler beside her. Shirtless. Reclined like he owned the air. They weren't startled. Not really. Tyler turned his head, saw me, and didn't even sit up. Amber's eyes widened, but there wasn't fear in them. Just guilt, clean and sharp. She didn't say my name. Didn't move to cover herself more than she already was. There was a pause, long, flat, sickening, where no one said anything. And that silence said everything. I didn't speak. I didn't scream or lunge or throw anything. I turned. Walked away. Gravel crunching underfoot. I don't remember the walk back, or climbing the stairs. I remember opening our bedroom door, sitting on the edge of the bed, and staring at the floor for what felt like hours. I wasn't shocked. I wasn't even heartbroken. Not in the way I expected. It was a hollow ache, like I'd been holding my breath for weeks and suddenly let it out all at once. She came back sometime around 3 a.m. The door creaked, careful. She didn't think I was awake. I stayed still. She didn't speak. Just climbed into the bed. Back to me. No apology. No lie. Just the sound of sheets shifting and the weight of her body settling on the mattress. The next morning, the group buzzed with hangovers and brunch plans. Amber pretended. She laughed. Wore sunglasses inside. She even made me a plate, placing it in front of me like we were still us. Like the night before had been a dream we'd shared and forgotten. I nodded politely, played my role. No one else knew. Or if they did, they said nothing. We left by noon. The car ride home was silent. Not the cold kind, but the resolved kind. She drove. I stared out the window. I watched pine trees blur into farmland. I thought about how this drive used to be filled with road trip games and inside jokes. I thought about how long it had been since we shared a playlist. Halfway through the drive, she asked, "Do you want to talk about it?" I said, "About what?" She didn't answer, and neither did I. When we got home, I went straight to the shower. Not to wash off sweat or lake water, but because I couldn't stand the way the inside of my skin felt. like I'd been carrying something that didn't belong to me. When I came out, she was sitting on the bed, facing away from me. She said, "It was a mistake." I said, "No, it wasn't." She looked over her shoulder. "What does that mean?" "It means I don't believe you." Silence. Then she asked, "How long have you known?" I thought about that, really thought about it. And I said, "Since you flinched." She looked down, didn't deny it. I grabbed a pillow and a blanket from the hall closet and headed for the couch. She didn't stop me, didn't cry, didn't follow. And in that absence, I found the purest version of truth I've ever known. Not in words, not in tears, but in the nothing. In the way she didn't reach for me. In the way she let me go without so much as a whisper. That's the thing about betrayal. It rarely announces itself. Creeps. Simmers. And then, just when you've stopped questioning it, it shows itself, not with a bang but a flicker. And in that flicker, everything changes. You don't yell. You don't cry. You just know. And knowing is enough. Coming home should have felt like a relief. But as I walked through the front door of our townhouse, duffel bag in one hand, keys still dangling from the other, all I felt was the air pressing in too tightly around me. Familiar walls. Familiar floors. Everything exactly where we'd left it. But something was off. The house didn't feel empty. Felt abandoned. Like a place someone had once cared for but now only maintained out of obligation. Amber was already upstairs. Door closed. No words exchanged since the drive home. I stood there in the hallway for a long minute, staring at the light spilling under our bedroom door. Half of me expected it to open. The other half didn't want it to. I walked to the kitchen. The island was spotless. The sink dry. No mugs in the drying rack. No crumbs by the toaster. Just clean surfaces and the faint smell of lemon disinfectant. There were still magnets on the fridge, photos from last fall's orchard trip, a save-the-date for someone else's wedding, a grocery list half erased. But none of it felt lived in. Felt staged. Like a set. I opened the cabinet above the fridge and pulled down a small locked box. It was one of those fireproof safes you can get at a hardware store, supposed to keep birth certificates and legal documents protected. Inside, tucked between passport copies and an old tax return, were the divorce papers. Unfilled. Untouched. Until now. I'd printed them 3 months ago, during a stretch of nights when I couldn't sleep and she was working late. Back then, it felt like a precaution. A contingency plan. I hadn't told anyone. Not even my best friend. It was something I'd done more for the idea of control than for any real plan of action. Now, though, it didn't feel like control. It felt like necessity. I carried the folder to the dining table, sat down, and turned on the lamp. The light buzzed faintly, warm and yellow. There was something surreal about filling out paperwork to dismantle a life. The questions were so formal, so cold. Date of marriage. Reason for dissolution. Proposed division of assets. There was no checkbox for betrayal. No line item for silence. But I filled them out. One by one. Deliberate. Calm. It wasn't rage guiding my hand. It was something quieter. Something heavier. Like walking into a room full of memories and turning off the lights. One by one. At some point, Amber came down. I didn't hear her at first. Just felt her presence. Standing in the doorway. When I looked up, she was in a hoodie. One of mine. Sleeves too long, collar stretched. No makeup. Hair tied back. She looked younger like that. Smaller. Like the version of her I met years ago, before we built this house into something resembling permanence. She said, "You're really doing it." I didn't respond right away. Just nodded. She stepped closer, slowly. "You're not even going to talk to me about it?" "I already did," I said. "You just weren't listening." She looked at the papers, at the pen in my hand, then at the chair across from me. But she didn't sit. She leaned against the wall, arms crossed, like she was trying to shield herself from something inevitable. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said. I almost laughed. "Then why did you?" She opened her mouth, closed it. She didn't have an answer. Or maybe she had too many. "Tyler?" I asked. She nodded. Quietly. "How long?" Her voice cracked. "Since April." It was August. For months. I looked back down at the forms. For months of lies, of deflection, of strategic affection. For months of going to sleep next to someone who was somewhere else entirely. I finished signing the last page. Slid the papers into the envelope. Amber stepped forward, as if to say something more. But I stood, not with drama, not to make a point, just because I was done. You can have the bedroom, I said. I'll take the guest room until things are filed. You don't have to do that. I know. She looked like she wanted to cry, but didn't. She looked like she wanted to reach out, but didn't. And maybe that hurt more than anything, the fact that she didn't even try. She just stood there, watching the version of me that used to be hers walk away. That night, the guest room felt colder than usual. The sheets were stiff, the pillow unfamiliar. I lay there staring at the ceiling, tracing the outline of the old popcorn texture with my eyes. In the distance, I could hear the faint hum of the fridge, the occasional creak of floorboards settling under the weight of history. At some point, I must have fallen asleep. When I woke, the house was still. No movement upstairs. I got up, padded to the kitchen, made coffee. I didn't bother with eggs or toast. Just the coffee. Black, bitter. When Amber came down, she didn't speak. Just poured her own cup, sat at the table. Her hoodie had been replaced by one of those crisp blouses she wore to meetings. Lipstick. A new kind. Dark red. The kind she never wore around me before. I've got calls all morning, she said. Okay. Neither of us said goodbye. I spent the rest of the day emailing lawyers. Quiet, efficient conversations. Everyone was polite, empathetic, professionally detached. One firm stood out. They didn't promise to win, just promised to protect. That was enough. By evening, the envelope was sealed, addressed, and sitting by the front door. Amber didn't ask what it was. She knew. We watched different shows in different rooms that night. The silence between us had settled into a routine. It wasn't angry, just vacant, like we were two strangers taking shelter in the same storm, but refusing to acknowledge the thunder. A few days later, I started moving things out of the bedroom. Just the essentials. Clothes. A few books. My watch. I left the framed photos. I didn't want them anymore, but I couldn't throw them out either. Let her decide what to do with the ghosts. There was a moment, standing in front of the closet, where I found an old shoebox. Inside were anniversary cards, ticket stubs, a napkin with her lipstick print from our first real date. I closed the lid, put it back on the shelf. Some things weren't mine to burn. That night, the house felt different. Not emptier, just quieter. The kind of quiet that doesn't ask for anything. The kind that lets you breathe. She came back 2 days later. Not from work. Not from an errand. Not from anywhere she could explain away with a receipt or calendar event. She came back from wherever she'd gone to think, or maybe to make her case. It was early evening, just before sunset. I was in the kitchen, stirring pasta into a pot of boiling water. Not because I was hungry, but because movement kept me from sinking too far into thought. I heard the door open and shut. Her keys landed in the ceramic bowl with a soft clatter. Footsteps padded toward the kitchen, then stopped short when she saw me there. Amber looked smaller, not physically, but emotionally collapsed. She wasn't wearing makeup. Her eyes were puffy, like she'd slept too much or not at all. Her hair was unwashed and tied into a loose, careless knot. She wore one of those oversized sweatshirts from college, the kind you never throw out no matter how many seams fray. She looked like a person who didn't expect to be welcomed, just tolerated. I didn't know if you'd be here, she said. I live here, I replied. It wasn't sarcastic, just true. She walked slowly to the far side of the island, like she was trying not to startle me, like we were two skittish animals on opposite sides of an invisible line. She rested both palms on the countertop and looked at the steam rising from the pot. You're making pasta. Yep. Smells good. I didn't answer. She wasn't here for small talk, and we both knew it. After a moment, she exhaled and said, I want to talk. I stirred the noodles once, then turned the burner down. So talk. She didn't start right away. I could see the gears turning. She wasn't searching for honesty, She was calculating, picking her moment, choosing the right emotional pitch. And maybe that sounds harsh, but once you've seen someone lie to your face with a soft voice and concerned eyes, you start learning to separate expression from intention. "I've been thinking," she began, "about everything, about us, about how we got here." I stayed quiet. She continued, "It's not just about Tyler. No denial. No excuses. That should have counted for something, I guess. I've been feeling lost," she said, "for a long time, longer than I admitted to myself. I didn't know how to say it out loud without hurting you." I said, "You ended up hurting me anyway." She nodded. "I know." I could see she wanted me to ask something. Anything. She wanted engagement, a doorway back in. But I wasn't there to carry her guilt for her. Not this time. "So what now?" I asked. Her eyes flicked up. "I don't know." That part felt honest. "I don't know what you want," she said, voice softer. "I don't know if you're done or if you're just trying to scare me into staying." That caught me off guard. I tilted my head. "You think this is about power?" "I think," she said slowly, "you want to punish me." I turned the burner off, lifted the pot, drained it in the sink without a word. Then I leaned against the counter and looked at her, really looked at her, for what felt like the first time in days. "Amber," I said, "this isn't about punishment. This is about self-respect." She didn't answer right away. "I didn't pack your bags. I didn't kick you out. I didn't even change the locks, though I could have." "Then why the papers?" "Because I don't want to keep pretending this is something it's not." She blinked, as if the answer surprised her, as if she expected rage instead of resignation. "I know you're sorry," I added. "Or maybe not sorry, maybe just regretful that it ended this way. I don't think you came back to beg. I think you came back to see if I was still playing the role." "What role?" "Husband, audience, fool. Take your pick." That one hit. She looked away. Her hand tightened on the edge of the counter. "I didn't come back to manipulate you," she said. "Didn't you?" I said calmly, "because it kind of feels like you're trying to regain control of the narrative." She swallowed hard. "I'm not trying to win anything, Mark. I'm trying to understand if there's anything left worth saving." I folded my arms. "Now you want to save it?" I didn't know how much I cared until I felt it slipping away. "That's not love," I said. "That's possession." Silence stretched long and uncomfortable. She was still gripping the counter like it was keeping her upright. "Do you still love me?" she asked. That one caught me. I wasn't ready for it. I thought about lying, saying no just to hurt her, to shut the door completely. But the truth was Messier. "I think I love the version of you that doesn't exist anymore." Her lips parted slightly, as if to respond, but she didn't. "That version," I continued, "would have told me when she felt lost, would have asked for help before she asked for escape." Amber stepped back from the counter. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. I don't know if that was restraint or pride. She asked, "Do you want me to leave?" "I want you to do whatever it is you were already planning to do." That stunned her. She looked like she'd expected a yes or a no. A decision, not an invitation to reveal her own. "So that's it," she said. "No," I said. "That's honesty." She stayed for a few seconds more, like she was waiting for me to say something that would take it all back. But I didn't. I dished my pasta into a bowl, walked past her, and sat down at the table. She stood in the kitchen doorway, watching me eat like she couldn't believe the story was ending without fireworks. But some endings don't explode. They evaporate. Eventually, she turned, walked to the stairs, and disappeared. She didn't sleep in the bedroom that night. In the morning, she was gone. A note sat on the counter. "I'm not running. I just need space." Maybe that's a cliché, but it's the truth. "I'll come get my things this weekend." She didn't say, "I love you." Not this time. And that was its own kind of clarity. Saturday came. She arrived around noon with a suitcase and a duffel bag. No boxes. No friends to help her pack. Just her and the quiet dignity of someone trying to minimize the damage on the way out. We didn't talk much. She moved room to room like a shadow, pulling down sweaters, stacking shoes, collecting toiletries. I watched from the kitchen, not because I didn't trust her, but because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. At one point, she paused in front of our bookshelf, pulled a photo from the frame, slid it into her purse, left the frame behind. That felt symbolic. She stood by the door for a long time before leaving, one hand on the knob, one foot still inside. She turned slightly, looked over her shoulder at me. "I hope you find peace," she said. I nodded. "I already have." No tears, no final kiss, no long hug. She left. The house didn't echo when the door shut. It didn't weep. It just was. A space now free of performance.